Welcome back to Vetted VA Live, where we get together here every week with some of our expert moderators, experts in real estate, mortgage, and talk about the topics that are coming up frequently in the forums in moderation and cover the questions that you, as a buyer or seller, borrower in today's market, need to be aware of. So today we're going to go a little bit of a different direction. Most of the questions in the forum are, how do I get approved? How do I know what I'm eligible for? What should I look for in a realtor? Today, we're going to go down the path of what happens once you've actually closed and you get the keys on your home. What does that first year look like? What do you need to be prepared for? What's sort of the cheat sheet that you should know that no one tells you? Because there's a ton of information on what happens prior to closing and not nearly as much after that. So before we jump into it, just want to make the introductions here. I am joined today by Gary Foote. He's a realtor, interestingly, both in the Los Angeles, California and Nashville, Tennessee market. So he's going to give us some insights and information on that. Gary, one of the things in the current market, and I'm going to go through this with each of you, is that a lot of mixed signals, people hearing the market's cooling, changing. In the two markets that you're in, why don't you give us a little quick market update on what that's looking like for buyers and sellers, both in the SoCal market and in Tennessee?
Sure, absolutely. Oh, first of all, thanks to everyone for tuning in and giving us an opportunity to be able to be with you tonight. I'm so appreciative to be able to be here. Um, it is market dependent, like you said, but both of the markets that I'm working in, there is a little bit of a transition. But a lot of times, I think when we hear that word transition, we take it too far to the extreme, one way or the other. So it's like, oh my gosh, there's a transition. And so things must be getting really a lot better for a certain demographic real quick. But that's not the case. So a good example of that is we're seeing in the Nashville market where I'm at, it's still very active where I'm at today. It's still very active. However, it's not as active as it was 3 or 4 months ago. So what that means is that you're still getting a lot of offers on each individual property, but maybe where you had 10 offers, you may have 2 or 3. So it is still competitive. Some people say, I'm starting to see some of the prices come down. It's not really prices coming down so much as it's sellers not being properly educated on what their expectations should be. And that's true of both Southern California as well as the Nashville area, is that we had this very fast appreciation level, setting records month after month after month. And so things that kind of look like, maybe there's a little bit of a crash or a dip or something coming, is more of a slowdown saying, we're not going to be able to be as aggressive, but things are still very solid. It's still a good time to buy, especially if your family needs or your personal needs warrant a move. And it's still a great time to sell because values are holding steady and are still, increasing, but just not as quick as they had been.
Perfect. We also have two lenders with us today covering two very different markets. So up top there, I've got Paul Sushariba. Hopefully I got that correct, representing the Dayton, Ohio market and working on the loan side, helping VA borrowers and conventional borrowers. How about the same question? How is your market there in Ohio? How has it changed over the last few months?
Yeah, so we're in Ohio, but I'm also up and down about 7 states up and down the East Coast. So we see quite a bit of a spectrum of the market up and down there, from Florida all the way up to Ohio. And I think Gary got it really right. And we've seen value appreciation and aggressive offers slow down. That doesn't mean that home values have gone backwards or come down. And we actually moderated a post today where somebody's talking about the possibility of values crashing in the next 6 months. I don't see that happening. We haven't seen that indication in the market because the demand is still there. We have way more buyers in all these markets than we do sellers. Whether it's Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Ohio, we have far more buyers than sellers. So until we get either more inventory or less demand from buyers, those values might stop going up, but they're not going to come down. They're not going to come down. So you're able to now go out in, at least in the Ohio market, go out and ask the seller to pay closing costs for you again, where you couldn't do that 6 months ago. You were paying full price, no closing costs or over to get there. So values are kind of moderating, we're kind of leveling off, but we're not going backwards. We're just not getting more aggressive. And I see that continuing. We see that kind of happening for quite a while into the Fed's predictions and everything else going forward.
Perfect. And our final guest here, last but not least, is Rodel San Mateo here. And you are here, like I am, in California in the East Bay area up in NorCal. Why don't you give us a little feedback on what you're seeing up in your area? It's one of the higher priced markets in the country. Affordability has been an issue, but what are you seeing?
So we're starting to see the same thing. I'm in the East Bay, just north of Silicon Valley, so Google, Facebook, all that good stuff. But we are definitely seeing a shift in the market. It's very different than it was even just 4 years ago. I've been to a number of realtor marketing meetings, different areas where you're hearing two words together we haven't heard in a long time. That's a price adjustment. So, if properties are turnkey and they still look good, they're still selling, but maybe they're not getting an offer the first day it hits the market, or maybe not the first couple of days. And if a listing is definitely overpriced, it's going to sit a while, and it might even get a price reduction or whatever how the realtor wants to put it. I think
Improvement,
I've heard the
price
phrase
improvement.
price improvement.
Yeah.
That's the way they put it. But the fact is, it's now, like Paul, Gary just mentioned, like we're not seeing crashing prices or anything like that. There's still a shortage of homes for sale here compared to the buyers who want to buy, but it's definitely a different market than it was even just 4 months ago. There's definitely balancing the home buyers that have a little more leverage than they were before, and home sellers they can't quite ask for everything plus the moon at this point in time.
And it's important. So I'm here in Southern California. So we've got three of us that have our hands in the California market. And it is a little bit different, but also very similar to the rest of the country and what everyone's been seeing with high prices. And I tell people, like, if I had told you 6 months ago that we would be in a market where there would be a couple of offers on every property, but you would have a good chance, and on certain properties you would be able to get a seller concession, or you wouldn't have to overbid and give up all of your contingencies, most people would be excited about that. And that's the market that we're in right now, a much more normal, much more rational market, and some people are alarmed by that. So we absolutely have to watch the trend and the trajectory. But what all three of you guys said is supply and demand dynamics are still very supportive of prices, even at the current elevated levels. And until we see that, not much is going to change. And the biggest thing, I don't know about you guys, but I'd never thought in terms of all of the really low interest rate loans that we did the last few years, with rates a little higher and prices higher, it makes it hard for people to sell and move on to another property when they give up these great terms. So it's really keeping that supply limited in most parts of the country, but definitely a much better balance and better for buyers.
Well,
so before
a lot of what we're seeing, Josh, to your point there is, at least in the Ohio market and the East Coast side, move up buyers can't move up as much as they used to now, because rates have gone up so much, values have gone up so much. So maybe that move up buyer can't sell and buy that next step today, because that next step is right where they're at because of the rate difference. So that's causing a little bit of market compression in terms of the value.
Absolutely. So before we jump into the topic tonight, any of you guys watching, we are here and happy to answer any questions on this topic or any other. So if you're out there, you're watching on YouTube, you're watching on Facebook, feel free to post your questions here and we will definitely get to them. But with that, let's start with tonight's topic, the first year of home ownership, what to expect. So let's say that Paul just had a client close escrow today. He calls and says, hey, good news, we got confirmation, it's recorded, the home is yours. Gary and his team are going to reach out and get you the keys to the property. Gary, why don't you give us sort of a walkthrough of where does that start? What should that buyer be expecting as they are now a homeowner and getting the keys to their new home?
Absolutely. Well, I think first and foremost, take a deep breath. Like, home buying is so stressful. And even when things go extremely well, there's still a lot of stress. As Josh was doing the introduction and sharing, I just moved into my house. I'm actually in my wife's office at the moment because mine's not even set up. I'm still in boxes for my home office. So I kicked her out. I said, hey, I got to get on for a vetted VA. But even for us to do this day in and day out, it's still stressful. So first and foremost, I just encourage you to take a deep breath, be kind to yourself, realize that there's been a lot that's been going on. You've been asked for a lot of financials, you've been asked for a lot of flexibility, you've been beat out on different offers. There's a lot going on. So first and foremost, take a deep breath, congratulate yourself, and remember that you did it. You did it. On the practical side of things, so I'm going to deliver the keys to you. What I'm going to say to you as your agent the first time that I deliver the keys is say, congratulations, here's your keys. Let's call the locksmith. We want to make sure that we get those locks changed out. That's something that's really important, especially coming out of the market that we've been coming out of, because there's a lot of people that were holding investment properties that put them on the market. They had been waiting for a period of time to be able to put them on rather than being an owner-occupied home. And so there's no real telling who all has keys to your house. So I highly recommend, right away getting the locksmith out there, getting everything changed. You want to make sure, even before I show up with keys, that you're having a conversation with your real estate agent, if you're not familiar with that specific neighborhood, as to what utilities you need to get turned on. Because it's so sad when someone shows up to their new home and they say, hey, this garage door isn't working. Are you sure the garage door that's not working? Yeah, we'll go turn on the kitchen light. Did you turn the power on in your name? I didn't know I needed to do that. So make sure that you know what utilities service your new home and call in advance. A lot of times have handy your settlement paperwork, whether that's in the state of California, we call it our escrow paperwork, and you can have that to provide to utility company. You can have your Alta statement. There's a lot of different final things that say I have title to this property, I have an ownership right, and you might need that to establish utilities. So those are the two things that I recommend right away is get the locksmith and make sure that you have your utilities. And then I'll let the other guys chime in here and we can go a little bit deeper into that, but those are paramount.
Well, Paul and Rodil, on the closing side for us, we get a ton of questions about that. Like, I'm getting this settlement statement. What is this? Why is there a check here? Why don't you guys kind of walk through on the borrower portion of the new homeowner, what questions they're reaching out and asking you guys and what that looks like?
I think the biggest one I get is how do I make my first payment? When can I set up online payments? Are you just going to take it out of my account, or do I have to do something? And I think it's important for a lot of borrowers to remember, I can't just reach into your account because I have your statement and grab your payment. You have got to set up your own automatic payments. And that's probably not going to come to you until really close to that first payment due date, which is usually 30 to 45 days after closing. So you're not going to get the information to set that up right away. It's not going to happen at closing. So pay attention to the mail, make sure that you get that information, you set it all up, or you send in a check. Because every time at closing, no matter what state you're in, we're going to give you a first payment letter in that closing package to make that first payment by mail via check if you have to. So kind of be proactive to get that set up.
Let me chime in real quick on a couple things that Paul said, because I think that one thing is really important. So like Paul was saying, you might get an overpayment check, a return check coming to you. If you are not going to be occupying your home, make sure you know where that check's going. Because a lot of times people think, oh, I'm going to get some work done, I'm going to have some painters. And unfortunately, you're not the only person that knows that house was just sold. That is public knowledge. It's in the public databases. And so there are a lot of stories of people monitoring mail because they know that a check might be coming. So you can either coordinate that final overpayment check to be sent to a family member. You could have it sent over to your real estate agent and they can meet with you at some point. But just make sure that you know where that check is going so that you can get your money and not have any issues with that. And maybe one of you guys might want to chime in too, because this is a question that I get a lot that's more lender related. But you guys want to talk about the secondary market? Because I get a call oftentimes about that right after closing saying, wait, what happened? I thought I thought Paul was my loan officer and was my mortgage company. What's going on here?
Right. So I know the most common question I get, as Paul mentioned, is how to make that first payment, how to set up auto pay so they don't have to deal with sending paper checks, that sort of thing. And then, yes, the other thing that happens, as Gary mentioned, is depending on who funded the loan, they may sell it immediately and maybe by as early as the second payment, they're making that check or automatic payment to a different company. And for anyone who's listening, what's happened there is your loan servicer has basically transferred those rights to a different company. There are laws in place to make sure you don't get penalized if there's some confusion. I think there is at least a 45-day grace period if you miss that first payment when a transfer happens. But that basically means that the servicing of your loan is being handled by someone else. I mean, the terms of now this is the most important question I know I get asked when that happens. The terms of your loan are the same. It might be a different name on the envelope or for your auto pay, but your loan note that you signed, your interest rate, your payment, the schedule, all that's all the same. And that's what's happening when, as Gary mentioned, your loan basically got moved on the secondary market to a different owner.
One mistake that we do see clients make a lot is that, oh, I had auto pay set up, my loan moved. Do not assume that the next lender will take over that auto pay automatically. That will not may not, it will not happen.
Will not.
Yeah, I want to be real clear there, right? So you've got to reset up your auto payments or they will not take that payment out and you will be hit for that over time. So pay attention when you get those letters that say your servicing has moved, but also read those very carefully because there's a lot of fraudulent letters that go out after closing. There's a lot of stuff you're going to get that may be not true and trying to get you to buy something else. So make sure if you have any questions, if you'd call Real Deal or if you use any of us for a loan, we'll know when that transfer happens. We're alerted. So we can kind of confirm that transfer for you and give you a little bit of warm and fuzzy about who's taking your loan over.
Along the same topic. So you will get things in the mail, and it's funny. In this day and age, no one likes to check their mail. People check their mail once a week and they want everything to come via email. But until you set that stuff up, it's going to come to your mailbox. And that first month in your home is a new and especially aggravating time to go to your mailbox because as a new homeowner, lots of companies are buying data on new homeowners. They want to sell you a security company. They want to sell you cable. They want to sell you cell service. They want to sell you all sorts of things. So your junk mail level is going to be 3 to 5 times what it normally is. But just like Gary was saying, one of those things that may be showing up there is a closing package with a check. You're going to get a bunch of other documentation. You're going to get the deeds that the home was transferred for you to own. You're going to get your title policy is going to show up. All of these welcome letters from the new lender saying, hey, we're your lender. Here's where you make your payment. Those things are going to show up. And then probably the worst and most aggravating part about this is many of these companies have gone above and beyond to make it look like they are the county recorder or the assessor's office sending you stuff. So you're going to get junk mail that is designed to look like government mail. And probably one of the worst ones that we see is these companies will send out saying, hey, fill this out so you get your homestead exemption that you're entitled to. But they want to charge you $59 or $129 to do something that you can do at no cost for yourself. So by all means, reach out to your realtor, reach out to your lender, ask any and all questions because it's almost impossible. Like you guys get this all the time. Someone will take a picture or a scan and send you, hey, is this legit? And the answer is almost always no, absolutely it is not legit. But these companies are very good at it. They know what those notifications look like and it's hard to tell.
And Josh, Rodale, you might have seen this too, but we're seeing them now go as far as because my license number is published on your recorded mortgage. And they're actually going out and grabbing my company logo, my name, my license number, and putting it on the mail. So it looks like I'm sending it to my client, but I'm not. So they're going really far to make it look legitimate.
Absolutely. And again, don't feel bad about getting tricked. We get tricked. Like I look at them go like, if I'm just a homeowner that does this once every 10 years or once every 7 years, I have no idea what this stuff looks like. And it will happen on a refinance also. And we should probably talk about that. This usually comes a little bit further down the line now that with VA loans, you have to have a seasoning period before you're eligible for that IRRRL, but you will get lenders popping up sending you notifications that should look like they are your current lender soliciting you for a refinance. So by all means, you can get a loan from anyone that you want, get a refinance from anyone that you want, but reach out, and say, did you guys really send this? Is this you? Because most times they're very deceptive and misleading in what they're telling you. These are companies that are just carpet bombing the world with mailers and feeding a call center of younger kids. So reach out to your loan officer, the person that you worked with. Reach out to your servicer if it looks like it's coming from them, and ask those folks what that looks like. Anything else you guys think that comes up there that first month that buyers should be aware of?
I would also make sure that, especially all your financial institutions, have your updated primary residence address. A lot of people will think, oh, I went through the United States Postal Service and did a forward all. First thing to know about the forward alls is that there is a time limit on those. And so there is a time limit. I think the current one, it's quite lengthy. I want to say it's almost 18 months for first class mail. But still, I would recommend, while you're thinking about it, once at the top of your mind, go ahead and manually do that yourselves, because eventually it's going to expire, just like some of the other things that we've spoken about expire. And then you'll say, shoot, I forgot to do that. I forgot to update some of these things. And it could be a privacy notice, or maybe something went to your spam email that was a bill. And so they tried sending you a hard mail. I'm sure you guys have seen it before, where someone goes years after buying a home, they're in the process of buying another home, and all of a sudden they find out that they're in collections, and they think, well, how did I end up in collections? And when they speak to the person at collections, well, we sent you notices this date, this date, this date, and this date, and we sent it to this address, and this address. And a lot of times the buyers say, well, I haven't lived there in a number of years. Well, but that creditor had your old address. So make sure that you're updating those manually, and don't assume that they'll be done for you.
It really, and some of the worst horror stories that we see on this is someone calls and, hey, I want to refinance, or we're going to sell and buy another property, and you look, and bills that did not get where they were supposed to go, a medical bill, a collection, and oftentimes from not updating that. Before we move on, we actually had a good question here pop up. Can a buyer pick which lender will service their loan before it goes to the secondary market? Can you guys, as a lender, can I as a lender say, hey, I want it to be serviced by this lender? Do we have any control once that loan closes over who's going to be the servicer, either immediately or over time?
Yeah, it's generally a no. I know there are some depository lenders who they say it's their policy that they're going to hold on to the loans because it's possibly like from an existing customer has savings, CD accounts, that kind of thing. But usually the loan package contains a form where the borrowers are signing saying, we acknowledge that this loan could be transferred to another company who will then at that point collect the payments going forward. So unless you have a very unusual circumstance, the answer to that is almost always no.
I think what you've got to remember as a client is that for us as lenders, and this doesn't sound really awesome or great, but your loan's an investment to us. And if we have to raise capital, we're going to sell that loan to raise capital for operations or whatever. And it comes down to where the best execution is as a lender. So it's not that we don't want to maintain you as a client. It's that we have to look at the entire business as a whole. And we're not changing your loan necessarily at all. We can't in any way. But by selling that loan, we're able to recoup more of our cash up front to do the next loans. And we can't place that specifically in all cases, or in most cases, we can't place that specifically at all. So.
And part of the reason why no one can make that promise to you is, as Paul was saying, there's a value to those servicing rights, and they change over time. So it may not be that your mortgage company needs cash. It may be that they have too much servicing rights at any given time. There's too much value in those servicing rights, and it's financially wise for them to balance it out. So we have, for us on the wholesale side, we broker loans, and we know there are lenders that we broker to that they're just going to sell it immediately. And there are others that are going to try and hold it as long as they can. So every company kind of has their own preference, but none of them will make a guarantee. And I can pretty much say every lender that we work with, I know at one point or another has sold a loan. I don't know a lender that I've ever closed with that has never sold one of our clients' loans or the service.
And as we build a servicing portfolio, right? And I work for a lender that does service a lot of loans. But as we build that, we have capital requirements. We're required to have so much money per $100,000 of service loans. And we might hit a limit where we don't have that capital anymore to meet those requirements. So we have to sell those loans to go back under the capital requirement and stay legal. So we might be doing that just to rebalance our portfolio to stay healthy.
A million reasons why they may do it, but again, no one can make you any promises that they won't. Even your local bank may sell that loan. They would be the least likely to, but they may. So why don't we transition after that first month or two? You've kind of got settled in, you've gone through all the junk mail, you've got your utilities switched, you've moved in, your locks are changed, you got your pool guy, your housekeeper, everybody's dialed in. Gary, what's next for a home buyer? What should they be aware of or start thinking of the rest of that first year?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that we forget about oftentimes as new homeowners is we forget that going through the process of buying the home, we were given a lot of information about the house. And so now that you're in, you've got your boxes mostly unpacked. You've got some more settling done into your home. It might be a good time to take out those old documents from the time of your purchasing period and review them. So specifically, what am I talking about? I'm looking at your seller disclosures. And most importantly, I'm also talking about your home inspection. A lot of times home inspections, and I get this a lot in the Vetted VA group, people say, oh my gosh, there's 30 things on this home inspection and I'm just gonna cancel your house. And I'll be the first one to pop in, wait. Don't cancel. Because I think a lot of times we forget that a home inspection, its purpose is really to help you to be familiarized with the home. And so it doesn't mean necessarily that your home most likely is in a sinkhole and it's gonna end up somewhere completely different, or if you're in the California market that soon, there's going to be a great earthquake that comes through and now you're, beachfront property in the whole state. Like that's not what's happening in these disclosures, but a lot of times we get nervous and we think that that's what's going on. So once we get past that initial fear and we are the homeowner, we're in, 4 months in, take it out again and look at it, because there might be some things that say, look over here because some of the paint in this area, it's a little, it's okay right now, but you might need to do a second application later on to prevent any water intrusion later on, because you don't want to have any of that bare wood there that could lead to rot and intrusion and whatnot. Some of these shrubs and trees, they're close to the property, but they're not touching the property now. But now that you're through a full season, maybe they are touching the property. Now they're allowing access for rodents to get into your attic. And so you need to trim some of those things back. So there's a lot of things that we might look over during the process saying, well, that's not that bad. But if we don't stay on top of routine maintenance, then those things will become an issue pretty quickly. And so a great cheat sheet for that is going back to your home inspection report to review those things.
Gary, that's like huge. I mean, it's not necessarily so much just to new homeowners, all homeowners. Like if you've ever, from 2008 to 2011, when the market was kind of at a lull and there weren't a lot of loans to do, I and one of my realtors flipped a bunch of properties, and it never ceased to amaze me when you would go in and see how much deferred maintenance. And you would talk to the people, well, what happened here? And a lot of times it was an inherited home, and they would give you the story over the years, failing health, or someone didn't have money, and $100 repair in 3 years is $1,000 repair. In 15 years is a $10,000 repair. So obviously life happens. We all have to make changes and decisions and trade-offs. You can't just do everything to your home when you want to. But a lot of this maintenance, deferred maintenance, and the sort of snowball effect there has a huge impact on what it costs you to own that home over time. So I can't state strongly enough that just staying on top of it, and sort of to your point of using that home inspection as a guidebook, because even if you had a perfect home, which no one does, everyone hopes that they're going to see the perfect home inspection come back with not an item on it. It goes through all of the systems. So even if all of the electrical is perfect, at least you have, like you said, Gary, a cheat sheet for what are the things that I should be looking at that might need maintenance, that I might need to stay on top of, and you can kind of go through. And again, it's sort of when we go buy a used car, we have different expectations of when we buy a new car. That home inspection is a little bit of a shock to a lot of buyers, but the reality is it's what you would expect. If you were buying a used car and someone went through, they're going to make notes. Well, hey, there's a scratch on the bumper. Hey, one of the door latches isn't working right. Some of those things are really important that you fix them. Some of them are important that you be aware of them and kind of adjust the value accordingly, and others you watch over time. So I really love that idea of kind of starting and using that as your cheat sheet for just staying on top of your maintenance over time.
Absolutely. And I look at it like this, and I always share this with my clients. I said, to me, a home inspection is very similar to getting medical care, right? If you go and you see a new doctor, almost always, what's the first thing that they ask you? Well, when was the last time you had blood work? They want to establish your baseline. Like a good doctor is going to establish your baseline, not a generic baseline. Because if they know that this is where your blood pressure typically is, this is where your iron levels, like there's all these specific things that might just apply to Josh or just apply to Gary or to Paul or Rodil. Like we have these things that are specific to us that may or may not be concerning. And the more data that we have prior to something changing, well, now we can start talking. And so the home inspector is going to say, well, this is what things were like on the day that we had our home inspection at this period of time. This is what's going on here now. So if there's a drop in water pressure, like, oh gosh, did you notice that the shower is a little bit weaker, honey? Yeah, I did, but not a big deal. And you think, well, if I go back to my home inspection, I knew what the water pressure was then because it was measured. And then I could go and check the water now and see, okay, well, is it in my head? Or is there maybe something that's faulty? Maybe there's a pressure regulator that we need to look at. So it's a great resource on so many levels. So I wouldn't just put it in a filing cabinet. I would continue to pull that out because it's going to serve you well.
Over on the loan side, this is a little bit unique to us in California, but property taxes and those property tax notices are going to be going out to buyers sometime there in the first 6 to 12 months of ownership. Rodil, you kind of want to talk through for those of our buyers in California, one of the things that can be interesting and exciting and a little bit shocking that first year?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I had a veteran, a home buyer, first time home buyer, who went through this a couple of years ago in the East Bay, where in California, and well, for any lender, when we calculate how much you can afford and what your monthly payment to your property tax bill is, we're calculating that on the new property value that you purchased the home at, because that's obviously the number that's going to be used from that point going forward. However, the county tax collectors, there's a lag time before they update their records. That may come in, depending on when you buy your home, you might get the updated value in 6 months, but I've seen that go as late as 18 months, that the property value does not get updated. And here's where that causes a problem. A couple of years back, maybe as far as 10 years back, homeowners were complaining that their loan servicers were keeping a huge amount of money in their impound accounts to pay property tax. So what happened to my veteran here, and what does happen to some people, is if there's too much money in that impound account because your county is not collecting the correct amount for this amount of time, you might get a refund from your loan servicer. You might just get a big check, but that's actually money you're still going to owe for property tax when the value gets updated. I mean, in this particular veteran's case, he was a Army enlisted, got a check for, it was like $4,000. And he thought, oh, okay, well, the loan servicer gave me this check. And then about 6 to 9 months later, he called me and with a question like, hey, how come I'm getting this second property tax bill? And I had to explain to him. I mean, fortunately, he still had the money. He didn't go buy a motorcycle or something like that. And I had to explain to him, okay, what happened here is the county did not update their property tax rolls until this point later in time after you bought it. So the loan servicer, by federal law, they had to give you this excess amount back. So for anyone buying a home in California, I'm usually telling my home buyers this right at the end of escrow, but I also tell them, I'm going to follow up with you in probably 4 months, and then maybe 4 months after that if you don't get an update. So they know if they get this check in the mail from the loan servicer, you got to put it in your your savings account or safe deposit box or whatever works for you, so you have the money when that supplemental tax payment comes due.
Well, and Rodil, I will counteract a little bit of that and say it's even worse in Ohio. We can go
Oh,
way
okay.
further down that road in Ohio because we pay taxes a full year backwards in Ohio. So when you pay taxes in July of this year, it's for the first half of last year. So we are like way behind. And when you buy a house, they only reassess values every 3 years. So you might end up 3 years after closing getting a double to your property tax, or 50% more, 25% more to your property taxes. And we don't assess it based on purchase price. We don't care. We do it based on county assessed value, which is generally below purchase price by 25% or so. So it's if you buy, especially a flipped home, a home that was sold for, let's say $200,000 and now it's sold for $350,000, you could see your tax bill go up significantly by year 3, but really you don't pay it till year 4. So we have these really weird gaps, and even the way that the sellers pay taxes that they owe to the client is actually negotiable on our real estate contract. So the sellers may stick you with a tax bill for a point in time when they own the house that you now have to pay if they negotiate it correctly. So we see this a ton in Ohio, but we can't tell clients 6 months. We got to tell clients, call me in 3 years and we'll even it out, because it goes way out there for that.
Well, here's one of the interesting things. California here's your timelines and says we've got something even crazier. So for those of you outside of California, which so it's probably 60% of the people are not here, 60% of borrowers are not in California. With the way our taxes work, we have something called Prop 13. So our property taxes can only go up 2% a year. So if a client buys a home from a nice little old lady who's owned her home for the last 50 years, she might have bought that home for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and it's only been able to go up 2% a year. And that could easily be $1 million home. So some of these supplemental tax bills, like Rodil's talking about, even though it's going to happen in 6, 12, 18 months, it can be a monster number. It's not as common because there aren't a whole lot of those folks, still under that situation of having paid so much less for a home. But it's just where we're at here in California. So it's important that folks be aware of that and that possibility. So the reason why other states, you're talking about that timeline of 3 years, the timeline, most states do it annually. Some do it every 3 years or so. California has its uniqueness, but we had this conversation about property taxes on the live probably 6 or 8 weeks ago. If you're in a property tax situation, you have questions, go back and watch that one. Because it's interesting. Every state handles it slightly differently. So with that, Gary, you had some interesting points of what someone should be aware of. As a buyer, you're keenly aware of how much money do I need. With a VA loan, you don't need any to put down, and we have other sources for coming up with money for closing costs. But on the selling side, should you need to sell in a short time frame, that can be different. You want to walk us through, as a new homeowner, what you should be aware of for when the time does come to sell?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the VA loan. I'm a huge advocate, just as everyone here is as well. That's why we're here. We want to be able to serve our veterans and their families, and so we're excited to be able to do that. But the truth be told is that it's very hard, and it hits me sometimes when I see a veteran that purchased a home utilizing their VA benefit who needs to sell in a short period of time. Because the VA loan is designed to get you into a home. It's not designed to get you out of a home. And so one very specific detail about that is that when you go to sell your home, you need to have some equity. And if you're buying using your VA loan benefit and you're putting 0% down, that means you don't have any equity on that day, right? Your equity is building as the value appreciates. If you're able to make some additional payments, then maybe you could build a little bit of equity there. But when you go to sell a home, the majority of the sales costs are seller related. So the biggest cost to the buyer is typically mortgage associated fees, right? When you're looking at that. So a seller is going to be paying typically real estate commissions, depending on, what state you're in. There's might be an escrow company like there is in California. There's going to be, settlement fees. Might be title fees. There might be county transfer tax, state transfer tax. There's all these different things that come into play that you become responsible for as a seller. So as a general rule of thumb, and you're going to want to speak to someone that's competent in your specific market for what their guideline would be. But typically for me, I tell my sellers, we need to look at having between 7 to 8% equity in your home just for you to be able to sell it and break even. And so that's something that I honestly tell people when they're looking at buying. If they're saying, hey, I'm going to buy, and then, because I don't want to rent, I'm a huge proponent of buying. I think buying is excellent. It's a great way to set yourself and your family up for success. But if you know that there's going to be a sell that has to come pretty quickly, that might be the one time that I say, well, let's slow down a little bit. Let's look at what are the statistics showing us on appreciation in your area, because you don't want to end up upside down in that home. Because even aside from just getting in there, even if you can get that 7 to 8%, you're still going to have the other costs that go into you. What were your costs to paint, to do some of the deferred maintenance? All these different things add up. And all of us here, we want to see you successful financially. And so I'd really keep that in the back of your mind, that you want to at least have 7 to 8% in order to break even. If you're going to want to walk away with some money, then you're going to need more than that from the equity of your home.
And home buyers have got spoiled the last few years. I mean, normally, if we go back 75 years, it's 4.5% annual home price appreciation. So you're talking a year and a half, 2 years, best case, before you get to, I shouldn't say best case, average case. And we've seen over the last couple of years, people would have that equity in 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. And a few of my realtor partners have had people literally sell 7 or 8 months after the fact and make money off of it. And people hear this and think, oh, it's easy to get in and out of a home purchase, and it's not. It's an expensive transaction, and you need to be aware of it. We had a really good question here that we had on our list that we were going to work our way through, but why don't we use this to transition over here? What do people do when realtors entice people with home warranties that basically don't warranty anything? So that's sort of a loaded question. Home warranties do actually warranty things. There are benefits to them, and there are reasons why realtors generally want them included in the transaction. So at risk of making you do all the talking here tonight, Gary, you want to tell us how that home warranty actually works? And as a new owner, if you find yourself in the property, air conditioner was working great during the inspection, 3 months later in the middle of August, it conks out. What does that process look like?
Yeah, home warranties are tricky. So first and foremost, the most important thing to understand about a home warranty is that they only cover new or unknown items. So they're not going to cover an existing item. So with that being said, one thing that you're going to want, again, to consult with your home inspection is, what was the state of this particular mechanical thing at the time of my home inspection? So that's number one. Number two, you brought up air conditioning. Air conditioning is one that home warranties love to decline. That might be number one. I don't work for a home warranty company, but the frustration that I hear from people is almost always their HVAC system. And almost always, what is the denial? The denial is because they'll come in and with the service call, they'll take a look at the system and say, oh, you know what? We're going to deny this because the HVAC system wasn't properly maintained. And so what does that look like? You can hear those infomercials a lot of times on the radio or on billboards as you're driving through the freeways of, tune up your AC for $129 every season. Those actually do make sense if you have a home warranty in place, because they're going to come out, they're going to look at your air filters, they're going to clean out your coils, they're going to do all the things that a home warranty company, when they come out, that they're going to want to see done in order to take it a little bit further. So, a home warranty isn't going to cover anything that was existing. If you have a 20-year air conditioner, most likely they're not going to come in and give you a brand spanking new system. They might look at, can we get a little bit more life out of this, a little bit more of a repair? And a home warranty, it's there to help you along the way. But it's also something that isn't a cure-all, unfortunately. It's not something that's going to be a cure-all. It is something that's going to help you. It's something that I always recommend that my sellers offer to a buyer, because it's one thing that they'll be able to use as a benefit, for the buyer. But I would never, ever, 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 ever recommend buying a home just because a home warranty is being offered. The value of that home warranty, depending on your market and your home, is going to be somewhere between $400 and $800, just to give you a general idea. And then your service call is going to be somewhere in the area of $65 to $75, per call. So even though it sounds like something that's absolutely wonderful, they do have their place, but there's a lot of limitations that come along with them.
1,000%. And the things I always like to tell people is these insurance companies, they're actuaries, meaning they've run the numbers. They know how to not lose money on this. So if they thought that the average person was going to have $1,000 worth of covered repairs, they wouldn't be selling the policies for $500, $600, $700. So if your expectation is everything's going to be great, there's not going to be a service call, there's not going to be a deductible, we're going to get everything covered. Gary, exactly what you said is have your home inspection done, uncover everything you can hope to uncover, and negotiate with the seller to repair what is known and needs to be repaired. Because that really, the home warranty is sort of a last line of defense, something catastrophic, really expensive, and unknown at the time of closing. So they get a bad rap, but there's some truth to it from that issue. Rodil, why don't you also talk us through this? For us here in California and in other warm weather parts of the country, wood destroying pests can be a big issue, and the VA actually requires, it's the only loan type that actually still requires a clearance if you go to sell the property. Why don't you talk through what a new buyer, a new homeowner can be doing to prevent the buildup of some of those costs over time?
So, in basically states in the roughly bottom 2/3 of the country, like if you're south of Oregon, you're probably in an area where the VA is going to require a wood destroying organism clearance. And basically, in fact, out with a circular on this. I mean, one of the most common questions, Gary's probably encountered this, is sellers saying, well, I don't want to sell my home to someone who's using VA loan because I'm going to have to pay for their pest inspection and repairs. And in the past, there have been some states that had a specific allowance for this. California actually is one of them that has the VA has specific verbiage. But the VA just came out with a new circular, I believe it was the 22nd, that specifically says that if you're in an area where the wood destroying organism report and repairs are required, the veteran can both pay for the report and can pay for the repairs. Okay, that's been a source of confusion for quite some time. And again, that's something that if you live in California or any of those states, it's something to consider as a long-term maintenance issue. I mean, obviously, this isn't something you probably not need to worry like right after you buy the house. 4 months, a previous problem. But in terms of ongoing maintenance, it is something you're going to want to consider.
And it's one that's easy to overlook. I know we talked about my home, lived there 19 years now, and for like 10 years, it's not something that you necessarily notice. And by the time you notice it, it's probably a bigger issue than you thought. So it's a good idea to have a pest inspector come out. I think you don't need to do it every year, but every couple of years, every 5 years. I don't know what would be an ideal recommendation, but for us, by 10 years when we noticed, there was like $1,200 or $1,300 worth of stuff. Whereas if we'd had them out every couple of years, we probably would have had a couple $100 of repairs. So it's an important thing to stay on top of as preemptive maintenance there. I want to use that question here as a transition here to another question that we have. So Trashy TV Junkie says, I've been noticing as someone wanting to do a VA loan, there are very few homeowners who will accept. Most are wanting cash or conventional. Any observations? And part of this relates back to what you had just said there, is that VA has a reputation of having some requirements that other programs don't. So in addition to not requiring a down payment, some additional unique factors, which for the most part are not true. They're remnants of the way that the system used to be. You guys want to talk on that for a minute of how VA offers can be more competitive and how we can coach and teach sellers and realtors that there's not really a downside to VA financing?
Absolutely. Don't mind me hopping in for just a second. So with what was just shared, I was just teeing up, and then you asked the question. I was like, perfect, this will tie right in. So as we started this conversation, we're talking about what are we seeing trending? What are we seeing that's different in the markets? And all four of us agreed that we are seeing some shift. And one of the words that we didn't use, but I think is really important to point out, is that right now terms are extremely important in your offers. We just came from a place where it was all price. But now we're at a place where we're looking at price and terms. So one of the things that scares people away about vetted VA, all offers should be vetted VA offers, about VA offers is that a VA offer does have so much misunderstanding that go along with it. And everyone is afraid of the unknown. That's just a fact of life, whether it's in real estate or anything else. Everyone's afraid of the unknown. And so a lot of times, if you know that the VA is going to require a Section 1 termite clearance, for example, and you're writing up your offer, you might include that in your offer. And so you're including it in your offer. It goes over to Mr. and Miss Seller. They're looking it over and they're saying, gosh, this VA offer over here is saying that we need to have the termite clearance, but this conventional one over here doesn't need that. So they're similar price, love the veterans, but I'm worried about this. So let's just go ahead and move forward with the conventional, right? Because the conventional is more known than unknown. So the question that you should be having with your real estate professionals are, what's going to be able to put us in the best light with our offer? What are some of the things that we can beat out on terms? And how can we take some of the unknown out of this? I literally just had this happen with a vetted VA client that we just closed in Escondido in Southern California. And on her offer said, look, we're able to negotiate some on the termite repairs. Let's not put it in our original offer. They know that we're going to be a VA offer. It's an area where a lot of VA offers, are known, but in a seller's mind, they're thinking, oh my gosh, this house might need $10,000 of termite work. But the reality might be that it's a $55 termite inspection. And now you just lost out on that house because they didn't do a termite inspection for the last 10 years, so they have no idea. And so my recommendation is always saying, okay, well, what is it we can do realistically to help alleviate some of the fear on that? And it can be conversation, it could be something that you're writing down. But, again, when you just put something out there saying we want a termite clearance, that's just saying we want a blank check. And that scares people. So it's a matter of how do we educate? How do we educate on this? And so have those conversations up front so that you can get your offer through. Always be honest and forthright, but there's a way to be able to do it without playing into the unknown and going towards fear.
And I would say the educational piece is super important. I actually posted a link here, episode 2 of Vetted VA Live. We went through this exact topic, getting VA offers accepted. And probably half of that conversation was exactly this: making sure you're working with a real estate professional who is very familiar with the VA loan program and using that financing and can explain that, because they're the primary point of contact to the listing agent, and through the listing agent, the sellers. You also need to be making sure you're working with a loan officer that's very familiar with VA financing, so they don't try and sell you away from it for these reasons or tell you, hey, you have to go get a conventional loan in this market, because we also have to get on the phone with the listing agent and to the sellers through the listing agent and educate them on how good this program is, not just for you as a buyer, but for them as a seller. The appraisal, as prices level off, this won't be as big of an issue, but the VA loan appraisal process and being able to basically rebut the appraisal before it comes in low, That's a benefit that we don't have with any other loan type. So again, if you guys are watching at home, you want to go full down the rabbit hole on that, on getting VA offers accepted and how to put your best foot forward. I posted a link there in the comments where you can go back to episode 2 and watch a full hour-long discussion on that. We've been going almost an hour here. We like to keep them in that ballpark of an hour. But before we wrap up, anything you guys feel like we haven't covered, or any points you would like first-time owners to know or be aware of?
I have one, and I'll throw it to you guys, and maybe one of you guys can pick it up. But I know that we talked a lot about the home warranty during our conversation here. But can somebody chime in a little bit and talk about the differences between home warranty and appraisal? Because I think sometimes those two get confused, and that might be some value here for our
I think,
viewers.
Gary, you mean home inspection and home warranty. Or home inspection and appraisal, right? Not home warranty. Yeah. You're muted. You're muted, brother. But the
Yes, but if I can't get it right, we're all in trouble. Yes, between the home inspection and the appraisal.
So there's a big difference in the inspection and the appraisal, right? The appraiser is there to make sure that your home meets the VA's minimum property standards and passes the value consideration. The home inspection is there to point out any defect that inspector sees on the day of the inspection to you as a service to you, so you know what you have to repair. You know what you're walking into. And they're going to go way deeper than the VA appraiser ever will. So those are two separate things. They're separate costs. They're a separate process. And just because the inspection has all these things listed, the appraiser may not notice any of them at all. They may not notice that the roof is going to need to be replaced in 5 years or 10 years, because they're probably not going to get on the roof and look. Your inspector might, or they might put a drone up there to look at the roof. So the inspector is going to go significantly deeper for your benefit into what might impact your home, or those conditions that could cause issues long term, like Gary talked about earlier, right? This paint's light here, so you got to paint it more so that you don't have water intrusion in the next 3 to 5 years. The VA appraiser's looking at, does it fit the guidelines today, and is it worth what you're paying for it, reasonably speaking, so that you can afford that house, and that house is not putting you underwater at closing beyond the funding fee.
And on that topic, think of the background of the appraiser versus the background of the inspector. The appraiser has a math background and is primarily coming at it from the perspective of the value of the property. And if they are approved to do VA appraisals, then they also have to be aware of the minimum property requirements. So it's a large section of the VA guide that tells them what a property's minimum requirements are. On the flip side, that person who's doing inspection has a construction background. They're not just looking at what is the minimum standard for VA, they're looking at construction standards, current code, health and safety issues. So they're going to go much deeper on that. It's great that the VA does have that minimum property requirement because they want to make sure you're not making a bad investment or getting yourself in trouble, but it doesn't eliminate the need to have that home inspection, because it goes much deeper and into greater detail, and it's going to make you aware of things that, again, in the current market where the sellers still have a good bit of leverage, you may not be able to get them fixed, but at least you know exactly what you're walking into on the front end.
And I'll throw that out, Josh, one more thing, right? Up until 2019, in Ohio at least, you, Josh, or Gary could have thrown a ladder in the back of your vehicle and decided that today you were a home inspector, because there was no laws governing who could be a home inspector. You needed no history, no insurance, no guidelines. So in 2019, Ohio passed a law and said, okay, now you got to have certain criteria to be a home inspector. So every state is different. Just because you hire an inspection company doesn't mean they're actually know what they're talking about. They don't have to. So make sure that somebody's certified by a national organization to do that inspection, so they know what they're talking about. They know that when the flooring slopes away from the wall, that could be a structural issue. They know what to look for, because every state has different laws and that, and there's no national law.
We got
Absolutely. Oh, let me put one more point on that, because I see this will come up a lot in our community. Is remember that there are limitations to the home inspection, and so I get a lot of questions, in Vetted VA, and people frustrated, and rightfully so, saying, "Gosh, I paid this money, I just bought this house, and X, Y, and Z is wrong." So there are limitations to the home inspection, and I know this is a real unpopular thing to say, but unfortunately it's the truth, is that the home inspector, they can only inspect things that are visible and accessible. Those are the key words, visible and accessible. So that means if the house is currently lived in and furnished, they're not going to be able to get underneath some of the furniture. They're not going to be able to move personal effects around. So it's visible and accessible. So that's something that's really important to keep in mind, is that there's going to be limitations to what they can and can't see and what they can and can't inspect. And the last thing that's going to be the least popular thing to say, but it comes up a lot of times, especially for first-time home buyers, which I know we serve a lot of first-time home buyers. Unfortunately, there's going to be something wrong with your house that you're not going to discover till after you live in it. That's the bottom line, and it stinks. It's awful. It's not fun when you're scraping everything together to get into a home, and you say, "Oh my gosh, I have to spend thousands of dollars to fix this thing. Why was it caught before?" There's a good.
I tell every client, have 1% of the purchase price left over to fix those things you don't know are going to happen.
Yeah.
Because they're going to happen.
And it's not malice. It's not negligence. It's just the way things are sometimes. And so, I'm sorry to put that out there, but that seems to be, in my experience, and maybe you guys, I know Paul just chimed in, but that seems to be just the way that home ownership goes, is that almost always you're going to find something that has some significance that needs some attention right when you move in.
We do not deal with this a whole ton here in California, but we did have another question pop up. When we're talking about maintenance and minimum property requirements, do you need to maintain outbuildings? So for Paul, and now with a new Nashville resident in Gary, in parts of the country where outbuildings are typical and normal, I would think as a homeowner, really, it comes down to, while you're there and enjoying the property, what do you intend to do with them, and do you want to keep them in good condition? But in terms of your minimum property requirements and resale, where do outbuildings fall in on that?
So the VA requires the home is safe and habitable, right? That's part of the appraisal that we go through. Well, if you can't safely walk into your outbuilding because it's falling down, that is a safety problem for the entire house. Outbuildings don't add a lot of value in general on an appraisal. We see them all the time here in Ohio with pole barns, with silos, with a bunch of stuff, right? We big corn country. If you have a carport or a pole barn falling down, that will be called out on the appraisal. It's got to be safe. It can't have peeling paint. It's got to be a habitable space, not in the sense that it has AC and heat and running water, but you can't put your life at risk by walking under it. So if it's not a safe space, the appraiser will call that out every time. And we see that very often here in Ohio.
I'll say one more thing. So I think Paul got the technical side of it, and so I'll hit the emotional side of it. I always say this to sellers when I'm sitting at the table with them and we're looking at things. You're selling your house to two different entities. You're selling your house, like Paul was just saying, you're selling your house to the appraiser. So the appraiser is going to come in and give a hard number to what the value is of your home, if it's going to be a financed home in most cases. And then you're going to be selling it to the people that are actually going to buy your house. And so as you're looking at aesthetics, as you're looking at functionality, it's going to be in your best interest, if you're thinking that this home may go back to sell at some point, to try to continue to upkeep different parts of your property as best as you can. Because when you go to sell it, I've never met one person who says, "All right, Gary, just go ahead and sell it for whatever you can get is fine." It's always sell it for the most that you can get, And then even when I put the number out there and say, "This is what the data supports," okay, that looks great. How about we push it up a little bit higher? That's always the first thing. It's never, how about we put it a little bit lower? And so when you're thinking about your home moving forward, then it's important to keep a handle on these things, including the outbuildings.
Perfect. So we got Gary's final thoughts. We got some ideas from Paul. Rodil, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Just to tie one in things in with the destroying organism reports, now that we're in a shifting market, and now that the VA has explicitly said that the veteran can pay for those reports and the repairs, homeowners, and if anyone's listening who's a real estate agent, listing agent or potential home seller, they now have an option to kind of mention. Look, one of the possible downsides for a VA loan is needing to get these pest repairs done. If it's Section 1, if it's something that's continuing to damage the property. So one thing I have seen in my area home sellers do is they will do the wood destroying organism inspection ahead of time. So they know what the cost for Section 1 repairs for a VA loan will require. But they won't take care of them on their own. So now they're in a position of, look, if a conventional offer comes in and it's the best, they don't need to do the repairs. But if a VA offer comes in, either for terms or price, and the home seller can now take advantage of that. They're not worrying, and they know up front, look, here's the number. If someone comes in with a VA loan and it's got, example, in the Silicon Valley area, this at the end is about $11,000 worth of repairs, which the veteran did end up paying, but that was for $1 million plus home. So basically, it's now a way for home sellers to kind of leverage the VA's new policy. Look, if a conventional offer is the best, great, you don't have to take care of those repairs. If a VA offers the best, well, you basically put in your terms, the veteran's going to pay for that. And now they can, and it gives the VA buyer just one more angle, one more advantage to buy that didn't exist, at least not explicitly a few months ago.
Perfect. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge and experience here. I feel lucky here that every week I get to just take part in these conversations and hear different parts of the country and both sides of the equation, both on the real estate and the mortgage side. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing with us. And again, we will be back here next week with a new set of experts and a new topic and be ready to answer your questions. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thanks for joining us.